Halloween night. Everyone's out. Kids in costumes, parents with flashlights, teenagers throwing eggs. But there's always that one house, the one with the porch light, that flickers like it can decide whether to stay on or off. In my town, that was the Weaver house. When I was 12, my friends and I dared each other to knock on the door. Nobody had done it in years. The story went that old Mrs. Weaver used to hand out homemade caramel apples until the year a kid choked on one. After that, she stopped opening the door. The husband died soon after, and the house fell silent. That Halloween, the light was on again, dim and trembling like the house wanted attention. My friend Luke swore it hadn't been lit in a decade. If it's on, he said, she's back. We laughed. We told ourselves it was probably just a prank. Someone new living there. But the truth was, the whole neighborhood knew the Weavers never had kids, and no one ever moved in after. Still, we went. There were 4 of us. We walked up the path, past the dead leaves and the cracked cement lion statues. The air felt colder near the porch, like the temperature dropped just for that property. Luke reached the steps first. He tapped the railing and said, "Watch. Nothing's gonna happen." He knocked. Once. Twice. No sound. Then the porch light steadied. It stopped flickering, and we heard the lock turn. The door opened halfway. There she was, an old woman, gray hair pulled tight, eyes wide like she'd been waiting years for someone to visit. She smiled. "Trick or treat," she said softly, but her voice didn't sound playful. It sounded rehearsed, like she was imitating the way someone else once said it. We stood frozen. Luke forced a laugh. Trick or treat." She reached behind the door, brought out a small paper bag, and dropped it into his hand. The bag was warm. That is the only thing I remember. It felt like it had just come out of an oven. "Happy Halloween," she whispered, and the door shut before we could say anything else. We ran off the porch, screaming and laughing. Half because of fear, half because it felt unreal. At the corner, Luke opened the bag. Inside were 3 caramel apples, but they weren't normal. The caramel had bubbled and cracked like old skin. One of them had a small brown stain leaking through the paper. "Dude, what is this?" he said. We didn't eat them, obviously. We left them on the curb and went home. The next morning, the bags were gone. So was the light. 2 days later, Luke didn't show up for school. His mom said he was sick, bad stomach pain. The next day, same thing. By the weekend, his house was quiet. I went over to drop off his homework. His mother opened the door, red-eyed, trembling. "He's in the hospital," she said. "Appendicitis," they said, but he didn't make it through surgery. At the funeral, his skin looked pale, almost yellow, and there was a small cut at the corner of his mouth. I thought about the apple. I thought about the stain. That night, I biked past the Weaver house again. The porch light flickered. Once, twice, then stayed on. A shadow moved behind the curtain. I don't know why I stopped, but I did. I left my bike and walked toward the porch. My hand shook as I reached the step. The door was already open, just a crack. Inside, I could hear whispering, not one voice. Several, like children whispering from far away. "Trick or treat." One of them said, "Primera ba, kid." Hawaii. My foot snapped a twig. The whispering stopped. Then the porch light went out. I turned and ran. Every Halloween since, that light has flickered back on same dull glow. Same rhythm. Some years, I see new kids standing on that porch. They knock. They laugh. They run. The next week, someone in town gets sick. Someone always gets sick. This year, the house is for sale. No one's lived there in decades, but the sign went up last week. And at night, if you drive by slow enough, you can still see that faint orange glow blinking through the curtains. It's almost Halloween again, and I swear, every time I pass it, I can still smell caramel in the air. Halloween night was supposed to be fun. That's what my sister kept saying when she convinced me to take her trick-or-treating around the new neighborhood. We had just moved a few weeks before, and my parents were out at a costume party. I was 16. She was 9. It was my job to keep her safe. Our neighborhood wasn't bad. Wide streets, trimmed lawns, smiling faces. But there was one house that looked off. No decorations. No pumpkins. No lights. Just a single plastic chair on the porch. We almost skipped it, until my sister noticed the candy bowl on the seat. "Come on," she said. "It's full." I looked around. No porch light. No sign of life inside. Still, she ran ahead and grabbed a few pieces. That's when we heard the voice. "Take as much as you want." It came from the shadows beside the porch. A man was sitting there, almost invisible in the dark. He wore a mask, a cheap, plastic one, the kind you buy from a dollar store. No expression, just hollow eyes and a flat smile. I froze. My sister didn't. She laughed nervously. "Tongues!" He tilted his head. "Happy Halloween." We left fast. I told myself it was just some guy having fun, maybe a lazy costume. But I couldn't stop thinking about how still he was. He didn't move. Didn't even blink. We hit a few more houses and headed home. That's when I saw him again. Across the street, standing under a streetlight. Same mask, same clothes. Just watching. I told myself it couldn't be the same guy, but when I looked again, he was closer. "Halfway down the block, let's go," I told my sister, trying to sound calm. She noticed him too. "That's the Candy Man," she whispered. We hurried home, cutting through the park to save time. The air was cold, and the sound of leaves crunching under our feet was the only thing we heard, until it wasn't. There was a second rhythm. A heavier step behind us. I turned. The mask caught the light of a passing car, white and empty, floating in the dark. We ran. I grabbed my sister's hand and didn't stop until we reached our porch. I fumbled with the keys, half expecting him to grab me from behind. But when I turned, he was gone. Inside, I locked every door, every window. My sister was crying. "It's fine," I lied. "It's just some guy." But I couldn't shake it. I pulled back the curtain just enough to see the street. Empty. We sat in the living room with the TV on for noise. After a while, I started to relax. Maybe I overreacted. Then came the knock. 3 slow knocks on the front door. My sister gasped, "Don't open it." I didn't plan to, but I had to look. Through the peephole, nothing, just darkness. Then, something moved. The mask appeared, inches away, staring right into the lens. I stumbled back. He didn't knock again, just stood there. I called the cops. They said they'd send a car around. By the time they arrived, the porch was empty. The officer looked around, said it was probably a prank. "It's Halloween," he said. "People mess around." That night, I barely slept. The next morning, I found something on the porch. A plastic mask. The same one. On the back, written in red marker, were the words, "Nice house." We moved again a few months later. But here's the thing. Last Halloween, I got a letter. No return address. Inside was a photo of our old house. On the porch sat a man in a mask. And in the corner of the photo, my little sister, standing at the door, smiling. The picture was new, taken years after we'd left. Halloween night in 2016 started like any other in our small Ohio neighborhood. The street was glowing with orange lights. Kids running from house to house, laughter echoing through the air. I had just moved into my new home a few months before and wanted to fit in, so I bought way too much candy. The doorbell started ringing around 7 p.m., and for the next 2 hours, it barely stopped. By 9:30, the flow of trick-or-treaters had slowed. I was about to turn off my porch light when I saw 3 figures walking down the street. They were small, maybe 8 or 9 years old, wearing old-fashioned costumes that looked like they came straight from the 1950s. One was a ghost, made from a yellowed sheet. Another, a scarecrow with a burlap sack mask. And the third wore a cracked porcelain doll mask. They didn't carry the usual plastic buckets, just small, faded pillowcases. When I opened the door, they didn't say a word. They just stood there, motionless, facing me. After a few seconds of silence, the one with the porcelain mask spoke in a strange, hollow tone. Trick or treat. Something about the way she said it made my stomach twist. Her voice didn't sound like a kid's. It was flat, emotionless. I laughed nervously and handed them each a few pieces of candy. None of them reached out. The ghost finally extended their arm, pale, small, and stiff, and dropped the candy into the bag. Then they just stood there again, staring. I tried to break the tension. "Nice costumes," I said. "Where'd you guys get those?" The scarecrow tilted his head, the burlap shifting slightly. The voice that came out sounded muffled, distant, like someone speaking through a tunnel. "We've always worn them." That was enough to raise the hair on my arms. I stepped back a little and said, "All right, have a good night, kids." Then I closed the door gently. But they didn't leave. I watched from the peephole. They just stood there on my porch, facing the door. No movement, no sound. After maybe 2 minutes, they turned in perfect unison and walked down the street, slowly, until they disappeared into the fog. I shook it off, told myself it was just weird kids trying to be creepy. But around midnight, I went to take out the trash, and that's when I noticed it. 3 small candy wrappers, neatly placed on my doorstep. The same brand I had given them, except the wrappers were old, brittle, yellowed, with a 1970s logo that hadn't been printed in decades. That freaked me out enough that I went back inside and locked the door. The next morning, I mentioned it to my neighbor, Mrs. Reynolds, who'd lived there since the 80s. Her face went pale when I described the costumes. She said, "You saw them too." Apparently, every few years, people in our neighborhood would mention seeing 3 kids in those same costumes. No one knew who they were. But she remembered when it all started, back in 1974. On Halloween night that year, 3 local kids had gone missing while they were never found. Their photos were printed in the paper, and their costumes matched exactly what I had described. I tried to find the article myself that night. It didn't take long. The photos were black and white, but I could see them clearly. A ghost, a scarecrow, and a doll mask. I felt sick. The headline read, "3 children vanish on Halloween night. Police suspect abduction." I couldn't sleep. Every noise outside made me jump. Around those a.m. I heard soft tapping on the window. 3 slow taps, then silence. I froze. My living room curtains were closed, but I could see faint shadows behind them, 3 figures standing still. I didn't move for what felt like hours. Eventually, the tapping started again. This time, on the front door. I called the police. When they arrived 15 minutes later, no one was there. The officer checked my yard and said there were no footprints, no sign anyone had been there. The next morning, I decided to check my security camera footage. But when I opened the file, the entire clip from midnight to 2:30 a.m. was gone. Corrupted. That same day, I got a letter in my mailbox. No stamp, no address. Just my name written in shaky handwriting. Inside was a single piece of paper, folded 3 times. It said, "They just wanted candy." I packed up and moved a month later. 3 years went by. I tried to forget it. But every Halloween night since then, no matter where I move, I always hear the same sound sometime after midnight. 3 soft knocks at my door. I've never opened it, and I never will. Because some traditions don't.